Hey, what's up guys? So time for a fun one. Time to talk about all the new radar detectors that have come out over the past couple months, all the updates that have come out to the existing radar detectors that we have, as well as some brand new stuff that I've never shared before, including some new radar detectors that are about to come out that haven't been officially announced yet and that we haven't talked about on the channel yet, but we're going to find out about them today. Now we've got a lot of different radar detectors to cover from a lot of different manufacturers. We've got everybody from Uniden to Beltronics, Escort, Net Radar, Radenso, Whistler, some new Valentine 1 apps, etc. So down in the video description, you're going to find a bunch of links, and actually more links than usual. As far as the updates, I'm only going to be talking about the main highlights for all the different updates. And if you want more information or discussion about them, you'll find a link for that, as well as to where you can go and download the updates for your detector. If you need to purchase any of the detectors, the current ones or the new ones that are coming out, you'll find links for that down in the video description as well. So with that said, let's just jump right into it. So starting off with Uniden, the Uniden R1 and R3, we're now up to firmware 1.37. There's been some new features that have been added, things like automatic display brightness adjustments or frequency announcements on Ka band to let you know what frequency the radar gun is.
34, 6, 7, 8.
There's been some improvements to the GPS lockouts and the ability to mute overspeed alerts on the R3, things like that. So some improvements coming for the R3 and the R1. Now Beltronics has a new radar detector coming out, which is kind of cool because Beltronics has pretty much discontinued all their detectors like the Magnum, the RX65, and the STIR Plus, and their website is kind of this like abandoned wasteland. There's nothing there. Well, there's going to be a new radar detector coming out that's basically a Beltronics version of the MAX 360. It's going to be called the Beltronics Gt3. It's basically a cross between the MAX 360 and the Beltronics GT7. It's got the look and feel of the Beltronics, but the functionality of the MAX 360. No information yet as far as availability or price, but that's going to be something that's coming out soon. And the big news is the fact that Beltronics actually has a new radar detector that's coming out. Now, Beltronics is owned by Escort, and there's a lot of stuff that we can talk about with Escort. Starting off with the remote, the Max CI and the Max CI 360. Those have been updated to firmware version 1.3.
The current version is 1.4, but it hasn't actually really changed anything over the previous versions.
It adds some support for integration with third-party infotainment systems so that your detector can actually integrate with the heads-up display in your vehicle. The Max CI, Escort has also announced that they're going to be releasing it as a radar-only package, and so if you don't want it, with Escort's laser jammers, laser shifters as they like to call them, you're going to be able to buy it now with the radar detector only, and then add on whatever you want, like a rear antenna, laser jammers, things like that. Escort has also released an international version of the Max CI called the Max CI International. It's basically the same idea, but it adds support for the MRCD and the GATSO, etc., so your international radar guns. That has been updated to firmware version 1.1, and it improves some of the filtering and the false alerts for GATSO radar guns. Escort's also going to be releasing a less expensive version of their remotes called the IX-CI, and that's going to be based on an M4 antenna instead of an M7. So it's like the Escort IX, but a remote version of it. So you're going to have less range than the Max CI, and the filtering shouldn't be quite as good, and it's not RDD immune. The display, instead of the color OLED display, it's going to have an LED display like the 9500 CI, but it's going to add Bluetooth and better filtering than the 9500 CI, etc. And so it's going to be Escort's new, more affordable remote mount detector. Escort's also going to be releasing a wireless version of their laser jammers. That's going to be called the ZW5. The ZR5 is their wired version. The Shifter Max is what they call it when it's integrated with the Max CI or the IX CI. If you get it standalone and wireless so that your radar detector can wirelessly communicate with your laser jammers, that's going to be called the ZW5. That's available now, retails for $850. There's two versions of it when you go to get it online. There's one that comes with a cigarette lighter power cable, and then the power cable has a chip to talk to your detector wirelessly. There's also a hardwire version if you don't want to use a cigarette lighter cable and you want it hardwired to make it cleaner. Escort also sells a hardwire version of it. Escort has also released a lot of updates for their windshield mount detectors to add compatibility with the ZW5. So a lot of these upcoming updates that we're going to talk about next, not all of them, but a lot of them, it's basically Escort ZW5ing all the things. The Max 360, for example, we're at firmware 1.7 or 1.4, depending on what version of the Bluetooth chip that you have in the detector. It basically, adds ZW5 support, and it helps address some of the lockup bugs that people have been experiencing with the detector. It doesn't totally resolve them, but it does fix a lot of them. Now, same thing with the MAX 360C, Escort's MAX 360 with Wi-Fi built in. That detector got firmware 1.2 and then 1.3 to do things like help address the lockup issues and add ZW5 support. There's also been some improvements to things like the Wi-Fi updating process as well. The Redline EX has been updated as well. We're now on firmware version 1.4, which, surprise, surprise, adds ZW5 integration, and there's some minor bug fixes. By the way, if you haven't already entered my giveaway for a free Redline EX, the giveaway is still going on for a few more days, so you still got time to enter. Go to the link in the video description and you can enter there. Now, something else is Escort has released an international version of the Redline EX, which is kind of interesting because the Redline EX, the North American one that we have here, also supports, well, the international radar guns, but there's now an international version of the Redline EX as well. There's actually 4 differences between the Redline EX and the Redline EX International. The first thing has to do with the Defender database for things like, speed traps and red light cameras. The North American one has a database for the North American threats, and the international version has databases for international threats. There's also little things like the international version has a splash screen at startup that says international. The international version lets you choose the language when you start up, and the default settings are different. So really they're pretty minor differences. The only real difference, I guess, is going to be the GPS database inside the detector, but otherwise, fundamentally, they're the same detector. The Redline EX International, it's been updated to firmware 1.2, which ZW5 support, and some more bug fixes. The MAX 2 has been updated to firmware version 1.8. It just helps improve the Bluetooth connectivity between your phone and the detector. We're still waiting on the update to give the MAX and the MAX 2 the same BSM filtering that Escort's newer MAX 360 and MAX 360C have. It's been promised for months. It's been continuously delayed for months. My guess is the reason is they're still trying to fix the lockout issues that the 360s are seeing, and only once they fix that, then they're going to release the updates for the MAX and the MAX 2. But in the meantime, we got an update for the MAX 2 after it's been promised forever. It wasn't the promised IVT fix. It was just Bluetooth connectivity. So we're still waiting on the BSM filtering updates for the MAX and the MAX 2. And then finally, the Escort IX has been updated to firmware 1.1, and that, just like the MAX 2, just improves Bluetooth connectivity between the detector and your phone. Next up, let's talk about the Valentine 1. So no new updates for the V1, still the same detector outside and inside that we've had for a little while now. The updates for the V1 are actually for the third-party apps, Yavi1, V1 Driver, and JBV1. So starting with Yavi1, Frankie, the developer, doesn't update it anymore, but he's given the source code to a couple other developers on RDF who have done some work to fix some bugs and add some new features. And so now we're up to 2.0.7. So some minor updates now coming out for Yavi1, and development has recommenced. Kind of a weird phrase. Development has recommenced for Yavi1. Now, there's a lot more development happening for V1 Driver and for JBV1. So currently, that's where all the excitement is as far as V1 apps. Starting with V1 Driver, it's the only iPhone app that you can get for your V1 to give you GPS lockouts, automatic lockouts, which is a really helpful feature. Now, there's some cool stuff that's being developed there. Things like dynamically adjusting the frequency range for the GPS lockouts. And so if you keep passing by the same signal and the frequency doesn't really vary much, it's going to start to tighten that lockout to reduce the risk of maybe accidentally locking out a police officer or something. If the frequency varies more over time, it'll actually widen the lockout and compensate accordingly. So it's the first time that I've seen dynamically adjusting lockouts done with any sort of implementation of lockouts. So that's pretty cool. Another bit of news with V1 Driver is it's also being developed now for Android. So you Android guys, you're going to have access to V1 Driver as well now. Now, I just put together a tutorial on my website, an article that goes over all the different settings and options in V1 Driver. So those of you guys who want to purchase and download the app, I'll link you to the tutorial down in the video description, and it'll go over all the different settings so that you can learn how to use the app and how to program your V1. The defaults are all really good there, but if you really want to go in and tweak anything, that's going to be a good resource for you. Now, the other app that's really cool in terms of development right now is JBV1. This is an Android-only app for the V1, and there's a lot of really creative and cool stuff going on there. I mean, it's got your GPS lockouts and low-speed muting, just like V1 Driver does. It's got your alert snoozing for BSM falses, but it's got some really novel stuff going on too. For example, they're working on location-based profiles so that as you drive around the country, your detector could automatically program itself and change settings depending on, where traffic sensors are in use or what radar guns police are using in that area. So it could be a self-programming detector depending on where you drive. That's pretty cool. There's things like displaying the current weather information on the screen of your phone, or even crowdsourced alerts. So basically, Waze and Escort Live. Similar idea with crowdsourced alerts being shared with other drivers who are running the app. So that's actually being developed right now for JBV1 too. Now moving on to NetRadar.
KA band.
NetRadar has released an updated version of their remote. We had the original NetRadar, and now we have the NetRadar DSP. Basically an all-new design under the hood, and it's got longer range performance, better performance. So the NetRadar was more of like a mid-pack performer, whereas the NetRadar DSP is going to be more of your long-range detector. So that's available now for the ALP if you want an integrated radar and laser setup. I actually just did a video right before this one that goes over all the new remotes. So the MaxCI, the NetRadar DSP, and the Radenso that we're going to be talking about next, it compares all of them. So click this button up here if you want to see that. Now, Radenso's got a lot of cool stuff as well. They've got the new RCM. It's available now, their remote detector. Really cool remote mount detector, MRCD, all this kind of stuff. There's been a lot of development going on for this one. It's currently available in the US. It's going to be available in Canada coming soon. So there's been a series of firmware updates as the detector has been updated. And I know there's actually more coming for the lockouts. With the Pro M, for example, the Radenso Pro M, this is their windshield mount version. It's like a Pro SE with MRCD detection capabilities. This is the second gen version of the detector. There's been a change under the hood, a new chip that they've added to improve the K-band filtering, the BSM filtering, so it's much, much better than it used to be with the first gen Pro M or the RP SE or the original Radenso Pro. Now, as far as firmware updates for the Pro M, there's been a series of updates to improve things like the false alert filtering, the GPS lockouts should be working now. US 8 just came out, the latest firmware for the Pro M, and according to Radenso, the lockout should actually be working now and should actually stick. So when you lock out a signal, it should stay locked out. Haven't had a chance to test it yet, but the word is so far that Radenso finally has their lockout issues handled, and if that's the case, awesome. There's also been some improvements to the Radenso Xp. Some pretty minor stuff, just some improvements to the like the voice alerts and also the update software itself. And so now we're at firmware 1.32. Next up, we're going to take a quick look at Whistler. Whistler's current top-of-the-line detectors are the CR88 and the CR93. Less expensive detectors, but the performance and filtering isn't really there. So Whistler is actually going to be releasing an updated version of the CR88 and the CR93, which is going to have improved sensitivity on both K-band and Ka-band to give us better range and performance with their detector. And one cool note about that update, it is actually a hardware change, not just a software change, and so there really is more going on than just a firmware update. It's an under-the-hood hardware update as well. Now, originally it was going to be called the Pro 710 and the Pro 725, but we actually just found out on Facebook the other day that they're going to be keeping kind of the same naming scheme, and so this CR93, the replacement to it is going to be called the CR97, and that's going to be available this month in April. Then finally, the last two companies that I want to talk about. The first one is going to be StreetStorm. They used to be known as American Radar. They're now going to be called StreetStorm. They're the guys who do a radar detector and a dash cam combo in one integrated unit. I had a chance to test the detector when it was the American Radar. The dash cam was pretty good. The radar detector was pretty bad. I had a chance to meet with them at CES, talk about their product and development and whatnot. They're still developing the product. I think it still needs a lot of work in order for the radar detector to meet a minimum level of acceptability, but they are working on that. They're introducing new variants to the detector and development continues. I'm not testing it currently. I'm kind of waiting for them to do more stuff on their end, but kind of behind the scenes, there's more going on with StreetStorm. And then finally, just for fun, a quick note about this Batman detector. It's like the Chinese detector. It's sold under a million different names. It's probably the worst detector that I've ever tested. I've done a video on it. You can watch that if you want, just for entertainment value. For those of you guys who are watching this video, if you've ever looked at a detector like this, do not buy it. This thing is a turd. It's a piece of junk. Definitely don't get it. But yeah, just I guess as far as a bit of news or something, there's a ton of companies buying these from China, turning around and reselling it under a bunch of different names with BS marketing and nonsense. And so I'm seeing a lot of people online who are buying that and getting screwed over. And there was actually an article of a guy down in Australia who was using one of those, and they advertise these detectors as being undetectable by radar detector detectors. Definitely not true. And well, he got caught with this, pulled over, and pretty hefty ticket in Australia where these are not allowed. So anyway, that's a whatever about those detectors. Other than that, yeah, that's a look as far as all the newest radar detectors that have come out over the past couple months, the new updates that have come out for the different detectors. cops around. Cool, always fun. Other than that, yeah, make sure you are subscribed if you want more videos like this and to stay up to date as far as new detectors that come out and the new updates that come out for the detectors that you own. So awesome. Thanks so much for watching. Let me know if you have any questions. Again, down in the video description, tons and tons of links referencing all the information and updates and links that you guys need will all be down there. So awesome. Thanks so much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed this, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.